Good afternoon. On behalf of EPP Group, I would like to present my colleagues, my friends. Rasa Juknevičienė represents Lithuania, ex-Prime Minister Andrius Kubilius, also from Lithuania, and Radoslav Sikorski, ex-Minister of Foreign Affairs from Poland. I also represent Polish delegation. I'm head of the Polish delegations. And the subject of the press point today is the point of tomorrow's agenda, the answer to President Putin for his attempt of distortion of historical facts concerning the Second World War. As you remember, in September, the Parliament adopted the resolution, which was not only focused on historical facts, but of course, the reason of this resolution was anniversary of agreement between Ribbentrop and Molotov, agreement between two six ideas, nationalist Nazis and communistic Soviet Union. But a lot of paragraphs of this resolution was related to the future, to the conclusions, why these historical facts are so important for us, for Europe today. And we have to say very strongly and emphasize very open, there is no acceptation for distortion of historical facts, and we cannot ignore those politicians who would like to accept totalitarianism, Stalinism, or other ideas like nationalistic ideas. We have to react because behind these words could be another aggression, invasion, and authoritarianism as a political idea. We have to react because no politician who ignores distortion of historical facts can call himself European. No one who accepts authoritarian governments can call himself European. These are our values and very important experience because of the past, and our obligation is to react, to protect common union, because we would like to live in secure Europe. I would like to ask Andrius Kubilius maybe first to comment also these words. Please, the floor is yours.
Well, Andrzej, thanks a lot. Good afternoon to everybody. And I will try to be very brief. Really, me personally, I was totally surprised by recent performance of President Putin on 20th of December with his 1-hour lecture to Lukashenko, Aliyev, and some other, leaders of former Soviet republics. And as even some Russian journalists acknowledge that is the first time, not only during last 20 years when Putin was a leader of Russia, but even during all 30 years when Soviet Union collapsed, that some leader of Russia would try to become a so-called historian. It was really a Soviet-type propaganda, attack on real history, which everybody knows how Hitler and Stalin started Second World War. Of course, I was very much surprised how Mr. Putin was trying to convince everybody that Poland was guilty by herself, that Hitler and Stalin divided her and occupied her. So we're standing today together with Poland for defense of true history of Europe and true history of Second World War. And we're standing together with Poland against this unprecedented propaganda attack. The question, which still I have no clear answer, is, for me, is very interesting and very simple. Why President Putin did it? My answer, again, is not very complicated. I saw a person, a leader of the country, which is in some kind of psychological frustration. And that is, I need to conclude, that is a typical behavior of an authoritarian leader who for the last 20 years was leading the collapsing empire. There are no big successes of Russia during the last 20 years. And the question which perhaps President Putin is asking himself, what will be the legacy of his leadership? Post-imperial leaders like to change the history in order to keep nostalgia to the past in society. Putin's behavior is a typical one. And unfortunately, ordinary Russians are suffering mostly of such an attitude towards history and towards common conscience of his own citizens. As we know from the history, collapse of empires take time to come to the end. At some time, Russia will be free from post-imperial legacy, and we shall see it from Russia's attitude to its history.
Thank you, Andrzej. Thank you so much. Of course, first of all, I would like to say and admit that I am very grateful, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, for his advertising of the resolution was adopted in September, because without that it would be a little bit less attention and less information what we adopted together with the 535 members of parliament in September. At that time, when I first heard these lectures of history before the Christmas, Putin's speeches on history reminded me of my young days in the occupied Lithuania. At that time, Leonid Brezhnev, then at that time aging leader of the USSR, started writing books. He became a writer. And I remember Malaya Zemlya, Little Land, we had to learn in the schools these crazy things. And now leader of Russian Federation, I think also a little bit aging, a person, he became a historian. So what does it mean? It means maybe that, seriously speaking, that maybe we are on the next stage of collapse of the rest of the USSR, because USSR collapsed formally, but still we have a very huge new aggressive empire, not new one, old one, but still empire, which is still problem for European Union and Europe and the world as such. But fortunately, reactions of various states' representatives have shown that very few, or maybe no one, believes in Putin's lies, and Putin will lose. He lost Ukrainian friendship. He lost this nation as Russian partner. He lost a lot. He lost even sports, Olympic Games. His losses are everywhere, despite that very many people think that he's a great leader or something like that. Nothing at all. So he will lose this battle, especially in the Western countries. Maybe he will find people in his countryside, because very many people, citizens of Russian Federation, they lost their fathers, grandfathers, and of course every family was touched. So he is trying to convince these people that still there are enemies behind the borders. But the question, though, is also for me what concerns me mostly, that Putin is trying to restore cult or return of Stalin's cult and restore Stalin as a leader. Imagine today Germany with the monuments for Hitler today. It's not possible to imagine. But in Russia, they are building monuments for Stalin. And Putin, first time in a very top leadership of Russian Federation, rehabilitated somehow Stalin, and he spoke on that Stalin was a good leader or something like that. That's what me is worrying. But of course, the question is whether this is only parallel world of Putin or signs of the future in the making, maybe, we don't know, new aggressions or something like that. And the last point I would like to mention is that I have initiated the establishment of European Remembrance Group. And the implementation of the resolution we adopted in September will be one of the objectives of this group. And I think it's not only about remembrance, it's also about the future, what we see is going around. So that's what I wanted to say in my introduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Radoslav Sikorski.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to start with praise for President Putin, because it was President Putin who, on the 7th of April 2010, became the first leader of Russia to visit the site of the other Soviet crime and the other Soviet lie, the Katyn forest near Smolensk, where 20,000, well, 5,000 in a particular spot, but overall 20,000 Polish POWs were murdered. President Putin also came to Gdańsk, to Westerplatte, on the 70th anniversary of the war, thereby recognizing that the Second World War started in Poland and not just with the Nazi attack on the Soviet Union. And it was in those years that we convened with Russia a group on difficult issues, in which Polish and Russian historians established the facts of our difficult history. And how well it did, let me illustrate by saying that the Polish chairman, the former Polish foreign minister Rotfeld, told me, Minister, if you remove the names of the authors of the articles in this book written by historians about those hardest issues, you would not be able to tell which articles were written by Poles and which by Russians. And I thought that was good, because at that time we had the first historic visit of the Patriarch of Russia to Poland, and an important document signed by the Polish Catholic Church and the Russian Orthodox Church. We were consciously trying to achieve a reconciliation with Russia on the basis of truth. And so what's changed? The facts are the following, that the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact was signed on the 23rd of August 1939, and a week later the Second World War broke out. And it couldn't have started at that time without the pact and the secret protocols that partitioned Poland and assigned Baltic states to Nazi and Soviet control. For logistical reasons, the Wehrmacht was not prepared to fight in the east of Poland with the winter approaching. So without that protocol, the Second World War would have been at least delayed to the spring of 1940, and possibly at that time a solution would have been found. Probably not, given the nature of the then Chancellor of Germany. And nobody is denying the contribution that the peoples of the Soviet Union, even though many of them were involuntarily members of that state, made to the defeat of Nazi Germany. In fact, I sometimes find myself differing from the Western narrative, whereby D-Day is seen as the turning point of the war. Actually, 80% of German war dead were in the East. The Second World War was mainly fought in the East, and we can confirm that. But a great nation can find it in itself to say we did something wrong. At that meeting on the 70th anniversary at Westerplatte, then President Lech Kaczynski not only said truthfully that the Polish participation in the dismembering of Czechoslovakia was a terrible mistake, he also apologized to the Czech Republic for that idiotic mistake. And it is no dishonor to us to do that, because no nation is without blame. So I just hope that President Putin returns to the path of truthfulness, because on that basis he could modernize Russia, which I think was his original idea for his country, to modernize Russia not just in terms of military technology and in terms of its aggressive foreign policy, but in terms of its society, its European vocation. But as long as he, after the Katyn lie, he now repeats the Second World War origins lie, we cannot let that pass, because if a leader of as important a country of Russia says that the Soviet Union behaved correctly, what we hear is that the current leader of Russia thinks it's okay to do that again. And that, of course, we perceive as a threat to our security. So I hope Russia one day rejoins the family of European nations, but it can only be done on the basis of truth.
Exactly. So once again, we cannot praising Stalinism and the distortion of this historical fact. We have to be also active on that. That's the reason why we ask our political group, EPP, for debate on that, which will be tomorrow, but I would like to emphasize that we have been united, not only within the group, EPP, but also all the political fractions of the European Parliament accepted this point, and we are together, we are united, and I hope that we will be united also tomorrow.
Can I add one thing?
Yes, of course.
I just wanted to add one thing, going what you just said. Why is important not to keep silence because somebody say that, oh, Putin is talking, but it's not necessary to respond to him. Why is important to speak and to respond? Because not everyone, not all people in Russia agree what Putin is saying. We see a lot of interesting debates on internet. We see very many people in Russia itself and outside Russia, those Russians, they live somewhere abroad, they are not shocked, but they disagree. And so that's why we also have to be together with them on the side of truth.
If you have any questions. If not, there are some. Stop.
Christopher Strzemka, Polish Press Agency. Short question. What's your expectation when it comes to the reaction of the Russian authorities to the debate and the resolution, if there would be any impact? Thank you.
They have to agree with us because historical facts are the only facts we can accept it. That's the point.
I'd just like to underline what the minister said, because yes, President Putin reacted to a declaration of this House. And I hope nationalists in our part of the world understand that when Europe speaks with one voice, truth prevails. And if for nothing else, I hope they recognize the usefulness of European integration for that.
Karol Srówka, Polish Radio. I just wanted to ask about two things. President Putin will have the opportunity to speak at the World Holocaust Forum in Israel at the end of January. Do you fear he will use this opportunity to spread more misinformation about the Second World War? And second question, I just wanted to confirm whether tomorrow's debate is an initiative of the EPP. Thank you.
Yes, it was an EPP initiative, and we don't know. It would be outrageous if he did, but at the same time, I think it was a mistake by the Polish government not to invite President Putin, as he often was before, to the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz in Poland, which is where traditionally heads of state met to commemorate this important event. It was the Red Army that released the last remaining prisoners of the German Nazi concentration and death camp there, and President Putin is the president of Russia, successor state of the Soviet Union. So I think it was a mistake, and we now have unfortunate results.
I would like to warmly welcome Mr. Gahler, who represents also EPP group, but from the western part, I can say, from Germany. So this is not only our regional issue, what I would like to emphasize once again. But important region. Of course. And maybe Mr. Gahler would like to say something.
Yes, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and sorry for making it only late. But I thought, and I'm very grateful to my colleagues from Central Europe, that they included us on an issue which, of course, shall I say it, has some relevance to Germany, and especially if we are getting the impression that from the Russian side there is an attempt to rewrite history or to put the blame on somewhere else. I can, shall I say, officially confess or reiterate what we have always said, that definitely the criminal energy started from Germany in the run-up, and they found another ally, in inverted commas, in the Soviet Union for the 23rd of August 1939, which gave Hitler the argument to start, or the aggression, the invasion of Poland on the 1st of September, and 17 days later the Soviet Union followed suit. And I think there is nothing there is nothing that could be blamed on any third party in this regard, which is insinuated. I find it historically outrageous to insinuate in a way that the Poles or perhaps somebody else was in a way co-responsible or even provoking the German aggression. By no means. Of course, we had apparently, and it's not a surprise, the then Germany, in its way making politics, it did not have the best relations with Poland. And yes, there may be issues since the end of the World War with the German minority in Poland or so, but nothing of that it by any means has justified or would have justified by any means the German aggression and start of the war. I mean, we all grew up with that, and that has always been uncontested and clear. And so politically, I have to say it's outrageous to find that apparently there is, for whatever, and I would not speculate about that, but for whatever reason, there is a tendency, even from the highest responsible one in Russia, to insinuate that if there was something to blame on Poland for the start of the Second World War. I have to say, coming from the country that started the mess, I don't feel relieved by such statements, and it cannot give any relativation of the German responsibility, but it is clearly, apparently, an attempt to distract from the Soviet Union's part of the whole thing that started 17 days later.
Thank you very much. And additional comment by Mr. Kubilius?
Yeah, very short comment. Since Rasa Juknevičienė just told that it was very interesting, thanks to Mr. Putin, it was very interesting to follow, we still know Russian language, to follow debates inside of Russia on internet, you know. And as you have seen, perhaps, you saw that President Putin blaming that Poland was responsible for beginning of Second World War. He also blamed that some former diplomat was anti-Semitic or something like that. So suddenly, really, it created quite an interesting flow of real information from Russian journalists, from Russian experts, and I can quote one of them from Novaya Gazeta, and the whole article is about the letter from some officials from Hitler after the war was started, after Poland was occupied, to Stalin officials asking to accept 2 million Jews from Germany and from Poland because at that time Stalin was creating Birobidzhan Jews autonomic region. Stalin refused. And that is how those, in some way, then, as you know, those Jews unfortunately ended in Auschwitz. But that is the real story, which, so the question is, who should be blamed at the end?
And that's a narrative, Russian Federation. Maybe I would like to add, because we are following very carefully the hybrid warfare narratives, information warfare narratives from Kremlin. Of course, history is one of them, and so-called anti-Semitism. We are not saying that it was everything perfect before, and of course not. Of course, genocide, everything, Holocaust, terrible parts of the history. But today's Kremlin, they are naming and blaming countries like Lithuania, Ukraine, other countries as anti-Semitic, fascistic countries. It's their narrative. It's their story to tell to European countries, saying that that story. So this is also, we have to understand, and not everybody understand these narratives today. For me, it's very, it's almost joke to blame Ukraine, for example, as anti-Semitic when president was elected with his roots as Jewish nationality. So that is elements, only elements, but that's also part of hybrid warfare against Europe, against the West, what's going on today.
And in the end, Mr. Sikorski, please, the floor is yours.
Let's recall that Chancellor Hitler and Nazi propaganda also blamed Poland for starting the war. The war supposedly started in self-defense after Poland grabbed a Nazi radio station at Gliwice. And some officers of Abwehr, I think, carried out the operation. Some bodies were dragged from Dachau with German uniforms. And this outrageous act, this outrageous Polish provocation, meant that the Wehrmacht had to, in self-defense, go into Poland. And my question is this, Mr. Putin, do you really want to be in agreement with Adolf Hitler on this?
So I would like to emphasize once again with the satisfaction that the answer for this verbal aggression, we can say, will be tomorrow very loud and very united, and the European Parliament will be not shy and will be not, I would say, will not ignore this Putin's words. Thank you very much.